interesting how some things change. And I remember when I was a teenager, for some reason I was in a group of other teenagers who made fun of people who wear glasses. I don't know why. You can't, the teenagers sometimes can be very cruel to others. Until one day I realized that I can't see at a distance. and then things changed. And one of the changes that I observed in the Jewish community in the last months, really since October the 7th, is the attitude of some Jewish people to Jewish symbols. On the one hand, some people stopped wearing Stars of David in public, probably out of fear of being targeted by anti-Semitic comments. And it's difficult to explain people that they confuse sometimes Jewishness with support for the state of Israel. And you wouldn't do it to a stranger. On the one hand, at the same time, for the same, triggered by the same event, some people, other people, deliberately started to wear visible Jewish symbols, such as kippah, tzitzit, or the Stars of David. And that became a symbol of Jewish identity and, in a way, a protest against anti-Semitism. It's very interesting how things change, how symbols change their meaning. Symbols are powerful tool of communication that we use. They're tools for expression, for our identity. They can evoke emotions, memories, associations. However, symbols are not static. They are not fixed. They can change over time, depending on the context, the culture, and the events that shape them. So today, I went into this journey of trying to remember the symbols that change their meaning. Let's start with the symbol of matzah, this unleavened bread that people eat on Pesach. And in fact, last week we read the commandment of eating matzah. So people, we are commanded to eat matzah at a certain time of the year as a reminder, but a reminder of what? And according to the biblical story, the Israelites had to leave Egypt in such a hurry that they didn't have time to let their bread rise, so they baked it flat. So matzah, therefore, in its pure original form, is a symbol of slavery, right, and hurry, and probably the symbol of oppression. And in the beginning of our Seder Pesach, we normally raise matzah and say, this is the bread of affliction that our ancestors ate in Egypt. But over time, matzah became a different symbol, a symbol of freedom. Because we were liberated from Egypt, and therefore this is what free Jewish people ate. It reminds Jews of how God delivered them from slavery. It's very interesting to see how in our times some people eat matzah on Pesach or during Pesach with a very expensive meal during Passover Seder. I personally saw a couple of times on Pesach Seder matzah, the bread of affliction and poverty that's supposed to be, with caviar on top, which I thought very interesting. So it becomes an expression of luxury rather than slavery and poverty. So what does it mean to have the symbols change? So another example of a symbol that changed its meaning in my lifetime and in my country of birth is this symbol. This is called Ribbon of St. George. It's black and orange. This black and orange ribbon was originally a military decoration in Imperial Russia, awarded for bravery for certain soldiers. But it was revived in the Soviet Union as a symbol of victory and heroism during the Second World War, especially against Nazi Germany. So this ribbon then became associated with patriotism, with the sacrifice and honor that Soviet people made during the Second World War. But after the annexation of Crimea by Russia in 2014, this ribbon took a very different meaning for many, many people. It became a symbol of Russian nationalism, expansionism, and aggression. It was used by pro-Russian propaganda machine in eastern Ukraine and the whole Russia, and absorbed a very different connotation since then. Today, this ribbon that used to be the sign of the Second World War became provoked many negative reactions by many Russians and many Ukrainians, especially Ukrainians, who see it as a sign of occupation, oppression, and betrayal. So it used to be on the National Memorial Day for the Second World War, and it is still in Russia, but it has a very, very different meaning. So the third symbol I would like to mention is the symbol that changed its meaning while being in the Torah. The Torah has the story about the two tablets that Moses received on the Mount Sinai. So in this week's Torah portion, Moses and all Israelites camp at the Mount Sinai, at the foot of the Mount Sinai. And Moses goes up on top of the mountain, and God speaks to him, giving him the 10 Commandments, the 10 Commandments that we all know and cherish so much. So on below, people hear thunder and lightning, and possibly hear the voice telling them the 10 Commandments, or to all people. So we don't really know who exactly can hear, but it's really interesting. So that's the scenery. So on the one hand, these tablets symbolize hope. Again, liberty, liberation, and order. Finally, we have commandments, we have laws. Covenant between God and the people. But if you keep reading the story, you soon learn that after Moses descended from the mountain, he found out that the Israelites had made a golden calf, an idol, and worshipped this idol while he was away. So what Moses does, he smashes the tablets, the two tablets, on the ground, breaking them into pieces. And the tablets then become a symbol of frustration, brokenness of this world, and disorder. They represented the failure of the people to keep their faith. So a midrash is a rabbinic legend and interpretation, develops this thought further and says that later when Moses goes back to the mountain and receives the second set of the tablet, and then later when Israelites build the tabernacle and the tent of meeting and the ark, which they carry in the desert for 40 years, they place in this ark both the new set of tablets with the 10 Commandments, the new set, as well as the broken pieces of the broken tablets. So both symbols became absorbed by people, the symbol of repentance, frustration, and the failure, as well as the symbol of hope. And the final example I would like to speak about today is this: portraits of Israeli hostages taken by Hamas on October the 7th. These portraits can be seen on the streets all over the world, showing the faces of Israelis who who Hamas terrorists keep in captivity until today. So people interpret these portraits in a very different way. Some people use them, some Israelis use them, to pressure Israeli governments to do everything possible to release hostages, including releasing all Palestinian prisoners and ending the bombing of Gaza in exchange for the return of the captured Israelis. So all for all, plus the ceasefire, they say. Do anything, everything possible to stop and bring them home means this: stop the war, exchange. Others use the identical portraits, identical slogan and symbol to say that Israel should increase the military pressure because only this will ultimately lead Hamas leaders to negotiate. Pro-Palestinian activists see such posters as a pro-Israel propaganda tool and therefore remove them from the streets. Sometimes people fight over these posters as if it is the posters that will stop the war and suffering. So this week, the Board of Deputies of British Jews invited communities, Jewish communities in this country, to adopt a named hostage, and to bring to the attention of local members of parliament, local councillors, the plight of those who are still held in captivity. So and the LGS got assigned or got sent these two names. And the Board of Deputies is asking us, the LGS, is to write to our MPs, to local councillors, asking for our two hostages to be released. Amit Esther Buskila and Dror Or. And you might be able to see these portraits now around the building. So the question I had when I saw this, what does it mean for us, the liberal Jewish synagogue, to have portraits of hostages on the walls of our synagogue? Literally. What does it mean to include them on the week when we read the 10 Commandments, including this commandment? You shall not make for yourself a sculptured image or any likeness of what's in the heavens above, or in the earth below, or in the waters under the earth. I asked this question: what does it mean to have portraits in the synagogue? At what moment images become idolatry? So, and I started digging. I started to read commentary. And this is what I found. The 13th century French commentator Giscuni wrote. So he quotes these commandments that do not make for yourself sculptured image or any likeness. And he says that in another place in the Torah, in the book of Deuteronomy, the Torah supplies the reason for this prohibition when we read this. For you have not seen any likeness at the moment of revelation, any likeness of God, meaning. You should not be able to say that I am a God who hides himself. And since no one can see you, I am forced to make for myself an image in order to constantly remind myself of you and to prostrate myself before your image instead, but in your honor. Interesting. So in other words, when you try to reduce God, something unexplainable, something that never can see, never can understand, to the image or anything simplistic, when you don't accept the complexity of life and God's creation, when you only present one side of the whole image, of the whole concept, you create an image that becomes an idol. That's what Giscuni says. The world is complex, hard to comprehend, and impossible to explain in a single slogan, in a single image. The world contains many stories, many sides. Therefore, when you see these portraits in the synagogue or anywhere else, perhaps when we see these portraits, we should ignore the interpretation, the slogan that is attached to this image, and see the person, just the person who is suffering right now, the person who needs support and love and wants to go home. Behind each portrait is a life, complex life. Probably these people would be very upset to be in this synagogue because we are liberal Jews. It doesn't matter. Possibly these people are not always a good people. It doesn't matter. So many lives were lost by this terrible war and hatred. Lives that deserve dignity and respect. Lives that family and friends cherish so much. Lives that are part of a larger story, complex story, difficult story of symbols that constantly change meanings. So perhaps these portraits should not become a political statement, but simple reminder that each war leads to a real people's suffering. And there is no such thing as a victory in any war, as long as there are people like Amit and Dror, and many like them in Israel and Gaza, who suffer. We pray for peace and hope that this nightmare will be over soon, that people will stop losing their lives and taking lives, and all who suffer from this terrible war will come home. Ken Yehi Ratzon, may this be God's will.